into something, right? Something is going to be really interesting today. I mean, like Shoaib is here. There is another Shoaib. He had an interview and we're very close to get a job. But we're pretty much diving into more complex learning materials. And we just have to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So that way we can move forward and we can make some progress. So if I get stuck on a small, let's say, subject and I spend 2 months, it doesn't really help you to go out there faster, right? So just remember that. So now we're talking about Selenium IDE. Anybody remember how many component of Selenium out there?
4.
4, right? So you want to tell me some of these?
Selenium ID, Selenium RC, Selenium WebDriver, and I forget another one. Selenium Grid.
Okay, and Selenium Grid. So Selenium IDE is a record and run. That means you don't write code. It is a plugin and it's limited to Firefox and Chrome. That's it. So limitation is you cannot test Internet Explorer. You cannot test Safari with Selenium IDE. So if your company wants to write some automated test and they said our customer, 80% of our customers are using Safari, is the Selenium IDE is going to be a good choice to use or not a good choice?
No.
Okay, and why?
Goes on Chrome.
Yeah, this is only running on 2 browsers, right? The limitation again, this is only running on 2 browsers. So it's not going to be a good choice because 80% of the customers are using Safari, and you as a QA, or let's say you were the lead or something, right? So you as a QA lead decided to use Selenium IDE and telling them, okay, we're 20% users are using Chrome, so we're going to basically just cover the 20%. What about the 80% of these customers, right? Their application is untested because on the browser that they're using is not even tested. Now they will face issues that you haven't even seen. So that's going to be a tool that you shouldn't choose when it comes about customer base. How do you know that how many users in your company using your application through different browser? Where do you get those data? Numbers, then analytics. You get it from the DevOps team. You have a separate team who's dedicated just to make sure that they're monitoring traffic. They're basically making sure that marketing is happening the right ways. In order for them to even market the product, they have to know where the traffic comes from. They have to know what devices they're using. They have to know what country is coming from. They have to know what areas of the country is coming from. And that's how they make different decisions. All right. So imagine like every day 1 million loan requests comes from specifically Queens, New York. And this is a California-based company, like you're working with a personal loan, for example, California-based company. And your company has to make some business decisions and they want to open up a branch. Where do you think they should try first? It should be like New York because it's New York, Queens, because that's where most of their customers are coming from. And so it only makes sense to kind of like go based off of their data instead of like, okay, this is closer to us and we're going to just open up here. But most importantly, if let's say talking about the software, most of the customers are logging in from their phone to pay their bills because they don't have time, whatever is the case. And the company wants to make a decision to like make sure that the customer have the great experience. They have to make sure that the application is also mobile friendly, right? And those decisions also come from the business, and business make those decisions based on those data. They look at it, they analyze it, and they see what kind of, what do they need. Our job is basically looking at those decisions, and we look at after the implementation. So after everything takes place, the developers make the changes, and everything gets updated. And then we're just coming in to make sure that everything was done based on those business requirement. Okay. All right. So with that said, Selenium IDE is just a record and run. It's a very lightweight tool. If anybody spent 2 hours, I think you should have been able to catch what the tool is and be able to get excited about doing some automated tests. So like I said, Sunday is going to be a deadline for learning Selenium IDE, so we can move on to the Selenium WebDriver. Selenium WebDriver do not even have what you are getting out of this, right? So you should probably enjoy it while you can, because what you see here, you see a user interface, isn't it? You as a user, you can actually interact with it, all right? Therefore, it's a user interface. So now you're able to create test cases through this application that was created for you. With Selenium WebDriver, there is no application. You just write code, period. You just write code, and that code does something for you. Okay, so things are going to be a little bit more difficult than what you see. If you have difficulty here, that means you're not spending enough time. And like I said, honestly, I'm going to give you guys an advice. If you, for any reasons out there, and everybody has their personal life and personal issues, but if you want to be successful and get a job, because it's not everybody gets a job, honestly, not everybody gets it, and not everybody will be successful, and not everybody will be a QA engineer, right? From here, from this group, not everybody will be, and I accept that kind of reality. Now, if you are serious and you want to be successful, it's easier to compress all of this knowledge into a smaller time frame and get it done, get it over, get the job, and just move on with your life, than dragging it for a couple of years, right? Where you just continue to try different, you know, maybe like coming in for the class, or even different courses, and you're not going anywhere, right? You're not really making it to a destination. So my recommendation would be like really concentrate, at least from today here on. So that way you can actually become successful, right? Now, if you guys did manual, I don't know how well you guys absorbed the material, because I don't see a whole lot in terms of the learning situation. So I may include some of the manual test cases and manual topics that you guys already have touched, in order to make sure that you guys just get updated, to make sure that you don't forget what you learned already. But just keep in mind that maybe, I don't know what happened before, but maybe you want to get serious right now if you want to be successful. Otherwise, we're going to go through the class. I can just go through the class and things will be done. And then at the end, we're going to say, okay, everything is done. Yay. But the problem is you didn't learn anything. All right. So one of the thing is, in technology, if you don't know things, it becomes significantly harder. Even it becomes mentally stressful for you. So tomorrow, somehow I place you on a job. If you don't know your stuff, trust me, you're going to be so stressful. You will be stressed enough to even consider quitting that job, even though you're making 100 plus, right? 110, 120. Money is not going to be enough to keep you in the job, because you feel way too much stress. You go into a meeting and you have nothing to say, or you go into a meeting and you're nervous. So those things will go away once you grow a little bit of passion about what you do. And the passion will only come if you spend enough time with these specific tools. Okay. Any questions? Anybody have any like comments in terms of, hey, I think I need this in order for me to, like, I just want to make sure that I can help. So if there's anything that I can help for you guys to focus and be able to continue with this automation class, I would love to do that. So any comments at all? Any?
All right. Well, I have a few things, because I know you seem like a very straightforward and honest man, and I respect that. So Ever since Java, I have not really been paying attention. I didn't even practice nothing. Honestly, I've been thinking about quitting my job just so I can focus solely on the schoolwork and I can put as many hours as possible into this because I feel like my job and whatever. So, do you think, the first 2 months I've been bull shitting this, but if I
Mhm.
really get into, is a possibility for success or is it still, realistically speaking, bleak?
So look, everybody have a fair chance to be successful as long as they don't quit, period. That's the first thing I would like to say, because I've seen people who literally, was not doing very well in the class, and at the end, they are probably the first ones to get the job. And I've also seen people that are like really, really paying attention and be able to do everything that we said in the class, and then at the end, it took them a little bit longer to get the job, right? Once you're out there looking for a job, there is that 50% luck that will work, right? Because you have to be able to get an interview, and after that, you get some help from us as well. But most importantly, we're talking right now for what happens after the job, like what happens after you get the job. Can you keep it, right? That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. So, so if you really, really tell me like, okay, so can I get a job? Yes. Even with this minimum knowledge, we can push you to get a job. But the thing is, can you keep the job? That's the question, right?
Okay.
So to get a job, like we need somebody that at least have basic SDLC, STLC, and being able to set up the interviews. But again, you go through interview preparation. You do go through training in terms of what to say, what not to say. So interview is really, really separate thing, right? Because you get questions and answer written. Even to say, tell me by yourself, you will have those questions ready for you. So you can tell them and you can sound like a QA person. So that shouldn't be like interview wise, you're going to be okay as long as you study. And now if you don't study the interview stuff, then it's on you, because now you'll be embarrassed in front of like 10 people who's trying to take your interview, right? So
Yeah.
that's why there is that pressure kind of helps you guys to be able to like learn the interview side. But then I'm talking about what happens. Let's say somehow fake it till you make it situation. You did get the interview pass and everything, you got the job, and now you're stressed because you can't do the job, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. So that's why learning is very, very important. The other thing is, if you guys for some reason, some of you guys will not get to learn automation as much as possible, like meaning some of you guys will not learn automation, period. Those we're gonna still market, and the salary difference is really nothing. So you're gonna be targeting the other job title, which is QA tester, QA analyst, right? Salary difference is not a whole lot, but there is a lot of work, right? So people that do manual work has to do a lot of work, period. People that does automation, we just basically do one or two test case, and we're just lay back and kind of wait until something breaks so we can go and fix it, right? So it is, there is a trade-off for everything. Now, if somebody knows automation, it becomes really, really easier for them to get a job, because now if the company is hiring manual, they will say, okay, if he can do automation, then I'm sure he can do manual, right? So it's like, is that kind of assumptions, because but if somebody cannot do automation and they can do manual, that's like, okay, disadvantage for the company. Now, what if the company wants to move on with automation? Then they will have to replace you and things like that. So I hear you when you said that you weren't able to spend a lot of time, but it doesn't need, like I said, if you do time management, if you're working 8 hours, totally fine. If you can do 2 hours a day, I think that should be good enough, at least for my class. But it'll get a little bit more intense. So I would say 2 to 4, maybe like 4 hours. If you do 2 hours per day, I think that should at least, put you on the right track. But that's not the ask, right? We want to do a little bit more than 2 hours.
I kind of didn't really grasp. I didn't grasp Java at all. Should I just focus on the Selenium SDL and more that focus, and then maybe
So
or should I still sprinkle in Java knowledge as well?
So whatever you guys learn on the Java side, I don't expect you to kind of like master all of those basics. Like these are obviously basic topics. So when I teach Selenium, I will also include Java. So now you're going to get to see like in real world where the Java is being used, right? So now you'll have the second opportunity to say, okay, now I can probably understand this better, right? So I'm going to include that, but most importantly, it's going to be, like I said, one of the things that I always mention to people is like, when you go to your computer science class for the first time and you haven't really done anything at all in terms of programming, you will change your subject. I've seen people actually do that because I have sometimes people come to me with their younger brother or whatever sister and like, hey, can you have some advice for this person? I tell them like, go home and do some coding, at least do some basic coding before you start your college, right? And people think like, oh, this is crazy. The professor is running 100 miles an hour. He's really not, right? So if I go into Selenium right now and start writing code, you will probably have the same feeling if you haven't really done the basics of Java. So I would say, again, I try to go as much as possible based on what you guys know, like your learning level. So for example, today's class was supposed to be Selenium WebDriver, half of it, but I'm going to spend on the IDE. So I will try to compromise and try to make sure that we can basically touch topics that you feel like you're not that good at in. But most importantly, I need for you guys to at least just say, okay, you know what, I couldn't do it in 2 days, but maybe that extra 2 days will help. But we have to make some progress, right? We have to make some progress in order for us to be able to in sync as an entire group. But now, if I don't see any progress, I will still, I'll probably like leave you alone, but I will still continue with my topics, right? Because I cannot wait too long, right? I cannot do 3 weeks all of a sudden for these to for me to continue. I do have to finish the entire Selenium, right? Okay, so with that said, guys, like I said, I need for you guys to be a little bit more serious about this because the end is very near. When I finish Selenium, you guys already finished SQL. So when I finish Selenium, I'm going to go right to the interview preparation. I'm going to go interview to profile creation. You will have your resume. You will have a script that you will be reading off of in order to sound more like a QA professional. And then I'm going to guide you guys out there. And just keep in mind, as long as you stick, as long as you don't give up, you will get a job, right? The bar is pretty low for a QA, right? Meaning like the way the interview goes, if you apply for a airport job, the background check and the amount of checks that you're going to go through, even like the multiple interviews in order to fit for that job, probably like we got to do 30 or 40% of that in order to get this QA job. So basically, it's not that of a big deal. If you passed a customer service interview, you should be able to pass this kind of interviews because the bar is very low. Not a lot of people, out there is who they say they are in their resume. And, when they find people that has at least some knowledge about the QA and QA engineering, they will make decisions to hire. All right. With that said, anybody else have any sort of questions or concern before we move on?
Yes, I have not question. It's like for the manual part, we finished the manual part, but
Right.
my understanding is that I didn't practice enough. Like we did one test plan project, and that's only one project to practice. So maybe this was the first one, so we could do some mistakes, or even I don't know what the mistake was. And if you can give us like some homework or something, and we can submit just to check where I am with the manual knowledge.
Sure. All right. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend the rest of the class. I'm going to probably create some manual test cases, and then we're going to automate them using this. So that way you see the whole entire flow. So for us to do some manual test cases, first, we have to get requirement. That's the first thing, right? So think about this way. This is the SDLC process, right? You get the requirement, you do the study and all of that. So let's go to the insurance website. So you kind of get this out of the way. So just remember, like, try to make sure that as a tester, as a QA engineer, testing is the core and bread and butter, because if you don't know SDLC and SDLC, then we have a problem, right? Whether you know manual or automation doesn't matter. If you don't know SDLC, then we have a problem. So let's see, we look at the auto dealer, for example, right? And our requirement says that auto dealer on the step 1 page. So these are like different step, right? So the step 2 is like when you click on it. So this is your step 1 page. On the requirement, I'm going to write a requirement as a BA first, and then we're going to take it from there. So let's say, and I'm going to write the requirement in acceptance criteria. And this is something that is happening more often. So acceptance criteria is basically means that this is described based on user point of view, right? But this is still a requirement. Before that, we used to have business requirement document. We used to have business VRS, business BSR, I believe, business specification document, BRD. And we also had use case, right, document. Those could be used as a requirement. So requirement is nothing but to basically something that says that how they want this application. So basically so here I'm going to write scenarios, right? A acceptance criteria can have multiple scenario, and each scenario is actually going to be a test case. So scenario 1, so the business person, I'm going to write multiple scenario. Scenario 2, and based off of this acceptance criteria, a developer who's going to be developing this website. So just assume that this website is not done yet. So I'm going to say build feature. Feature is basically the main. So build a step 1 page for auto dealer site, right? Okay. So now acceptance criteria is basically scenario 1. I can say as a internal user, I would like to use auto dealer site in order to provide customer a code, right? So for example, so this is just objective. So now scenario, you guys know what scenario is, right? Scenario 1, let's say an agent goes into the website, and the first scenario is enters first name, last name, email address, phone number, zip code, but he doesn't enter his agent, referring agent, right? And does continue what happens, right? So these scenarios, like for example, somebody who's working for that company goes in here, he forgot to enter all this information and click continue. What should happen? It should probably like give a error message like this, right? What if that person enters first name, last name, right? But then email address is missing, like the valid email, right? This is not a valid email, right? So he enters zip code and you click continue. Now there is three different form of message showed up. It says a valid email address, valid phone number, and a 5-digit zip code. All three we have issues, correct? So we want to validate. So the first one is the first one always should be like a happy path. So first one, assume the user is good. He knows how to use this application. johndoe@gmail.com. Right, and then 5-digit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he clicks on continue, right? So then they basically were able to go into the next page, page number 2. But in this case, we want to say that given user is on the dealer step 1 page, right? When user enters all required information. So like I said, all required information. Okay, so anything that is required here. So I assume all of them are required on that field. Then they are able to move to step 2 page, and user can see all pre-written. So pre-filled message, right? So that means if I enter zip code in the previous page, it carried over here, right? Full legal name didn't even showed up here. So then that's a bug, right? The full legal name should have been carried out here actually. So that's a bug. We'll create a bug. So now as a user, we should see all pre-written user information in the step 2 page, right? So what we just did is we just created our scenario 1. Okay, now scenario 2, it could be same, but now in this case, let's say we're going to do a negative scenario. So user enters, let's say, empty value for all fields, right? Then they should see error messages to see the following error messages, right? So now here we have to put the error messages. So errors 1, so error 2, error 3, whatever is the case, right? So whatever we just saw, like if I go back in here and I empty out everything. Okay, so I should see all of these, right? So that's the idea. So I just basically, for our learning purposes, we just wrote errors so that way it doesn't become too big. Okay, so now we're talking about scenario 3. Scenario 3. So think about, again, think like a user. So now we tested the negative scenario where nothing was entered. But then what if someone enters, like, let's say, information correctly? Okay. Okay, but then he forgets, he enters an extra numbers in zip code, right? And then it shows this, right? So we want to say user enters all valid data, but zip code, but he enters. So let's say zip code, he enters some crazy number, right? Then they should see the following error message, which is zip code enter 5-digit zip code. So now we're individually going for each and every single error. So I can have another 4 or 5 scenario just for each individual field that will throw error when they're empty, right? So then what happens if I just click on this, right? In a hurry, submit now, and in continue, same thing, right? So now we can multiply all the scenario with 2 because we have 2 situation. And then we have to do the same scenario with with agents and without agents to see what happens, right? So the scenario goes really, if you were able to come up with, let's say, 50 scenario, that will be times by 2 for one for with the agent and one for without the agent. And then the other one, and then those will be times by 2, one with submit right now, and the other one will be going into step 2. That many test cases you can actually come up with as a tester. Okay, so the analytical part also needs to be applied. Anything else that we're missing, or we think I covered everything? What we're missing here, what kind of test cases that I'm missing? I'll give you a hint, I'm missing a lot more.
For this page?
Yes. Okay, let's make your life easy. Just these fields, just focus on these fields, nothing else.
Okay.
What other test cases that I may be missing right now?
Can you go back to requirements?
Requirements is basically, I think I just verbally said all of those. I didn't write because I can't possibly write everything, right? Because it's just too many.
Phone number.
Okay. What were you saying? Sorry. Think about anything think about also uncertainty, right? If you have a cat, okay, and
Agent name is John Doe and you have written John Smith.
No, but this is a customer. You are the agent collecting.
Oh, shit.
Oh, referring agent.
Okay. Yeah. So you are an agent. Your name is John Doe, but then you are collecting customers' information, right? To give them a code. So now let's say, okay, I'll tell you this, right? I'm going to give you a hint. So now you are typing this, and then somehow John Doe, who's the agent, he also owns a cat. He's typing, and then on his keyboard, a cat walked in, and now he got this, and he got this, right?
You don't you have
first name
do it twice, maybe?
Yes, but let's say on this page, like I'm going to tell you the severity of this, okay? So he's writing John, and then somehow he didn't look, his cat walked in and he did this, right? And he still sees John is there, so he didn't realize these things, and he clicked continue, right?
Yeah.
This scenario we didn't cover, right? Meaning we didn't test this scenario. So now we have to test it because this is alphanumeric value, plus it is a value with that is special character. On the first name, last name shouldn't be that case, right? We shouldn't have like special characters on the first name. We shouldn't have alphanumeric value. Now, why there is a problem with this? So this is a real situation, right? Imagine your application directly collecting this data and putting it in the database, okay? And now if that is the case, if this goes into your database, it's gonna create issue to a point where the whole application may crash right away. As soon as you click on continue, everything is gonna be white. All right. And obviously developers have many mechanisms before even that happens, right? They will probably validate this information before putting it in the database to be safe. But I'm just saying worst case, right? Where your developer didn't even care about checking this number and you didn't test it, and now the application crashed, right? Because of this. Because this special character is not anticipated for a table to have this data in a specific row in a specific column, right? And now things are broken, right? Now somebody has to go in there and see what really happened and then go ahead and update the data, right? Because what you're doing is pulling and pushing data. So as soon as you click on continue, this data is pushed to the database, right? And then on the second page, it will pull the data from that specific database, right? Now, in order to make the pool, it will do a query, but it will not find anything, or it will have significant amount of issues because of these special characters that was not anticipated, right? They didn't expect this information to be there. So now we have to cover that, right? So now what if I have like a value like this? We got to cover that, right? What if I have email without the @? We got to cover that. What if I have an email that has the @ and that has, let's say, Gmail, but it's missing the com, right? We have to cover that. But what happens with the number, right? Phone number. What if I have like more than 10 digit, right? What happens then? What if I have just negative numbers, right? What happens then? What if I have positive numbers? Will it work? And things like that. Then you have your zip code. Zip code should never start with 00, but again, you want to test that 5-digit, but also zip code comes with, like, after the 5-digit, there is county code, right? So you want to make sure that if the zip code is more than 5 digits, it shouldn't work. But if it has this and there is a county code that matches, it should work, right? So these are some test cases that I'm talking about, right? These are just some, but a lot more you can create. Okay, so you're in here, what can you test, right? A lot of things you can test, right? So I just want to make sure that your mind just kind of expands to that kind of possibilities, that a test case can be created for, a lot of test cases can be created for just for this interface. Now I'm going to show you guys something, and it will probably open up your mind a little bit. So test cases for login feature, right? So you go into this, and these are sample test cases somebody actually wrote, and it'll probably come handy one day in your interview, because they will ask you like, okay, tell me how many test cases you can come up with. And they're going to say, just keep saying it until I say stop. Meaning they know that you can come up with a lot of test cases if you actually have that critical mindset. So now, just for a login, how many fields there are for login? Right here, you can see username, password, and login. That's it. That's how the application looks like. For these, we have test cases. Look at this, how many test cases we have, okay? We have all the way down, I think close to, it's a lot of test cases, right? I think it's gotta be 60 to 70 test cases just for these application right here, just for login. Okay, so let's review some of these. So for functional side, for functional tests, we have 14 test cases. One user wants to validate that they're able to log in with valid username and valid password. That's a positive. The negative is valid username, but invalid password, right? Then we have blank fields. Then we get to click on forget. Then we get to click on, we basically checking for the invalid messages. We're clicking on remind me. We're doing basically the field data, password field should not be visible because it should be encrypted. That, and we are doing the time log. We're basically checking for font color, how it looks, look and feel. So we're doing UI and positive testing. We're checking about the usability. So if somebody clicks on cancel, how that works, and so on. Then we have non-functional testing, which includes security testing. And then we have these other test scenarios that can be also part of those. Then we have the sign up. So you have to basically think about the possibility. You have to think like a user. You have to think that what are some things that they can do? What are some things that they will do in the application that you have to cover in order to make sure that your application doesn't break when the time comes for them to use the application? So imagine like all of a sudden, Facebook wasn't the thing. Let's imagine, right, that Facebook is not out there for people to use, and now you have the opportunity to test Facebook and push it out there so everybody can use. So let's say push already took place. Okay, now people are trying to register and log in. Can you, as a tester, go to everybody's house and say, hey guys, let me show you how to sign up. Don't enter this, So for example, I'm going to go into Facebook right now. So let's say Facebook is public. For the first time, I'm here. Okay. And now, can you control me as a user to say, dude, don't do this? It says, okay, enter phone number and email, but okay, who cares? I don't care about the phone number, email. I'll go ahead and enter whatever I want. And then I will go ahead and do what I want. Can Facebook stop me?
No.
Okay, so now if let's say for any reason, Facebook doesn't mitigate or some sort of, they don't combat this kind of problems, meaning somebody can potentially come in here, enter garbage just like this and click on login. And if Facebook doesn't come and say this message and kind of don't let them know that you're making some mistakes, instead the Facebook let them log into somebody else's account, will that be a problem?
Yes.
Right? Okay, but what I'm trying to say is that do Facebook have any control at all in terms of telling users what to do?
No.
Okay, so that's why Facebook and their QA team has to make sure that every possibility that is out there needs to be tested, every kind of possibility. Okay, so now you enter an email address, let's say John Doe 1234@gmail.com. That is a valid email address. And then let's say you enter some other, like maybe some special character, whatever is the case, and click on continue. Okay. And now Facebook is basically thinking, so let's give it time. I hope they tested this scenario. Okay. So now the email address is fine. As long as the email address is good, they are fine. And now it says the password you have entered is incorrect, right? So it says login with Google and forget password, whatever is the case, but Facebook could have also included the register button. Maybe this person is not even registered. So maybe I guess if I try to do it with Google, it will register me, right? So think about this way. Now, if I click on forget password and I click on continue and it says enter, right? Oh, wow. This actually existing.
Someone is getting that code.
Somebody's gonna get that email. So that's why it didn't. Okay, that's why it didn't show me that your account doesn't exist. But anyway, so now let's say somebody come in here at this stage, and I don't own this email right now. I just go ahead and enter some garbage, and it lets me in. Okay, so I enter 5-digit number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and it just lets me into their web account, right? Should we be testing this?
Yes.
Okay, should we be testing didn't get the code?
Yes.
Should we also test that if somebody try to enter, like again garbage, like it says it has to be 6-digit numbers only, that's it, right? But I'm entering like a whole bunch of stuff, okay, like garbage, and click continue, right? Should we use this message where it says letters only, you shouldn't enter any letter, it should be 6 number long, right? So all of this scenario, like just think about it, that how many you can come up with, right? So that's how we create, that's how we create, and that's a scenario too. What if somebody wants to go backward middle of this process? Then it shouldn't allow, right? So that's something that you also have to test it. So anything and everything that a human can do to the application, you have to test it to make sure what happens. Will your application handle that situation? And if it does it correctly, that's something that we have to test it. And that's why we have to write a scenario, a lot of scenarios. Okay, so now that we understood what's a scenario, let's write some test cases. And now you agree with me that these test cases are not enough. We can actually write a lot more. I'm talking about hundreds of test cases, test scenarios, right? Yeah. Okay, so now that you got this and you can write test scenario, anybody here that cannot write test scenario after this conversation? If you can't, just say it and I will see where we can explain and maybe explain better. Right, so I'll give you another example to you guys, a test scenario. So from here to, let's say, Times Square. Okay, so the goal is from Jackson Heights to Times Square, you guys have point A to point B. Your destination is Times Square, and your start point is Jackson Heights. And now I have 1 million people that I'm telling them to go to go to Times Square. Okay, by all means, that means they can choose whatever method of transportation. Okay, so now come up with, okay, give me some ways that they will arrive, right? Come up with something. Who wants to try first? How
By
many
train,
possible
by
ways?
bus, by cab.
Okay.
Dirt
That's
bike,
it?
subway, train, lime scooter, bike, walking.
Walking.
What else? Anything else?
Bicycle.
Okay, what else?
Car, truck. There are many ways because like
So many different ways.
Okay, so many different ways. Whoever said that, you're thinking it right, because now this opens up your mind a little bit, because when you go to the interview and they're asking you, here is a coffee cup, I want you to give me test cases, and you're gonna be like, what? And you may just get mad, like, what is this? I'm leaving, or whatever is the case, or you may just get nervous. I'm like, what? I can't come up with this. But the moment they give you an object and say, give me test cases for those, immediately think about this point A to point B situation that I just gave you guys, and you will be able to come up with all the test cases that you need. Now, you guys came up with good ones, but again, there are a lot more, right? Meaning, what if somebody takes a bike, then takes a train, and then he walks, right? What if somebody takes a walk first, then takes the bike, and then takes the train? Okay, the combination can be in different order. And then what if somebody actually takes a bus, takes a train, and then comes back to Jackson Heights and then walks over there, right? Can you, basically you have no control over what they do. They can do whatever they want, right? What if somebody's rich enough to take a helicopter from Jackson Heights to Manhattan? Is that a possibility? Out of 1 million people, how many people do you think it'll do that? I mean, probability, right? You have to think about what kind of probability that you have. So let's say you anticipated at least, let's say somehow one person was able to afford a helicopter and take it from Jackson Heights to Manhattan. Is that a test case that you have to cover? Is that a high priority test case? Tell me if this test case is high priority or low priority, first of all, and then we can.
not the
Low
high
priority.
one. Low.
Low.
Why is it low priority?
Because that's very slim chance that someone from Jackson Heights would have a helicopter.
It's kind of unrealistic, but it's happening, right? It does happen, but it's unrealistic, and the numbers of users are affected will be minimum, right? So for some reason, one person is taking the, you have to choose, right? You got the 99% of the people you're covering versus one you couldn't cover. You cannot possibly test it, because now it's going to cost you so much money to get a helicopter and then see if you can land it in Manhattan, right? So your product owner will come to you and say, hey, I'm okay if you're not testing this. You may just come back, and these are called edge cases. Edge cases means like it's so edgy that it might never happen in the real world, but there is a possibility it will happen, and the company is okay to deal with that. They're going to be okay to deal with that kind of casualty. So now this one person got affected, or maybe like 10% got affected, which is like tiny fraction amount of users that your company has. They're going to be telling you, oh, okay, that's not a problem. That's okay. We're fine not covering those people. And you can't continue to move forward. What the company will probably do is, okay, we better off giving them a refund, and we're not going to lose as much as money if we try to cover that scenario also, right? We cannot just hold the product in development because we want to cover everything. So not everything we can cover. Edge cases, What do you do if you have edge cases in your team? So you found something. Do you make the decision to not to test it, or what do you do? What can you do at that point? You found a test case that is like so like unlikely to happen, and in order to even test it, you have to go that extra miles.
So do you go
what
to your
do you-
business analyst or the product owner maybe?
Okay, and what do you tell them?
Tell them like the situation about it and have their input on it.
There we go. So we, as a tester, we don't define the product, right? We don't tell them how the product should be, because again, that's not our department. Our department should be just checking to see if they're getting the right things. If they ask for specific items on the application, if they're getting it or not, period, right? So now if you do find an edge case, you're going to say, look, I would love to test it, because as a tester, we want to do everything, but I'll leave it up to you. If you want us to test it, we will, but otherwise these are some of the edge cases that we came up with, and it will take extra time to test. And they're going to say, okay, well, likelihood of a actual user using the application on that kind of scenario is none, so we're okay not testing it. So then you just say, okay, can you write it on the document, and then I'll move on. That's it. And that's how we're going to move on. We're basically, think about cops, right? They follow the rules and regulations and laws, right? They don't make it. If they basically catch you, it's not like how they feel, right? It's not like how they feel for the day to, and nowadays, they have to do the right thing because cameras and all that. So same thing when it comes about bugs and when it comes about test cases and all that, like we're like on that same category, except that we don't really, we don't do physical things. We basically go into softwares and we try to be that kind of personality, right? So you might end up getting that kind of similar personality, but in a very, calmer side, right? You will also be a little bit of aggressive than the other coworkers, because, you're finding a bug and you have to jump on it. You have to tell them what's going on. You have to see who's going to fix it. You have to do also ask developers and be on their shoulder to make sure that they finish it, so you can move on from that specific task. So it gets interesting for you. It does get enjoyable. At the same time, it's like at least 70% less work than a developer. Our salary is very much same as them, but our work is more important than the developers' work. Developers are building the application, but you will see the engineering manager, who's their boss, like developer's boss, they will come and talk to you most of the time. It's because you get to check the quality, you get to find those issues, and you get to then make sure that the application is doing the right thing, and that makes the product better, right? So you'll see that there is a lot of value for QA. When people try to fire, they cannot fire QA right away. They cannot fire QA, like, which happened to one of the company that I'm working in. And all of a sudden I hear like this person is gone, that person is gone, and all of that. And I didn't even know. And then I find out, oh, they couldn't really get rid of the QA department, right? They couldn't really, because they need them. So QA is very, very essential, and it will always be essential, right? Automation doesn't replace the QA work, at least not yet, right? So make sure that what do you bring to the table, right? What do you bring to the table as a QA? Otherwise, think about this way, like if I'm asking you to test this, can a high school kid test this for me? Is that a yes or is that a no? If somebody just graduated from high school and I pick him from the school and I said, okay, go ahead and test this for me and find any issues, can they do it?
I think yes.
Yes, right, they can. But
Yeah.
then why would somebody pay you for your experience? Why would somebody pay you 110,000 to do the same work? Think about this way. What do you bring to the table? Okay, it's you have to lose that kind of like perceptions where somebody says, oh, it's easy and all that, right? You have to
Reliable.
use your
Because in
critical thinking.
worst case scenarios, you know what to do. They wouldn't know what to do in a worst case scenario.
Yeah, because you kind of went through this training, you kind of develop that critical mindset, and you have to, right, at some point. And I'm saying, like, I'm not saying, okay, it's going to come immediately, but after some time working, once you have actual working knowledge, you'll realize that your mind is more about why, like why this is happening, why not this, and why not that. So those questions going to come through. But most importantly, in order to bring value to a team, you have to absolutely know how the application works. So first of all, application knowledge is required. Second is you have to have a critical mindset, regardless of you are somebody who knows automation or somebody who knows manual testing. So you have to absolutely be very critical to this and say, okay, what happens this and what happens that? And you have to find all possible combination. You want to break the system. You want to break the system, and that's something will make you different from somebody who's coming from the street, somebody who just finished training, or somebody who just graduated, right? That's how you bring the value to a team. A developer should be coming to you and saying, hey, I have no idea, how did you find this issue? Wow, how did you even discover it? And now they're like curious, like, how did you find it? I didn't find this. I also did some testing myself. And that's where the value is, right? So that's why sometimes, like, the interviewers, they ask you questions like, oh, okay, so what, what do you bring in? Or tell me why you're different than other QAs, or tell me why, why QA is important and all of that. So this is when you want to kind of like come out and say, it's not all about just testing, but it's also you applying critical mindset and finding and breaking the application is something that you're good at, right? That makes you different from the other people. All right. With that said, we got the test cases that we wanted, right? We got the test scenarios, and think like these are requirements. And now we have to write test cases, right? So test cases, typically you write it in Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my numbers, which is some of you guys probably already have on Mac. So I'm going to try to use numbers for now. I do have probably Excel. Okay, let's just use Excel since everybody is familiar with it. Okay, so a test case is basically going to include some of the important information that you guys have to know, right? Some of the tests. Oh, but okay, it's opened up. Okay, this is not. Now, a test case will include few things, right? And these are more critical, I would say. Test case ID. So for example, think about the whole thing as a test case. So step, let's say 1, and so steps is going to include description, is going to, and again, every test case could be different. Yeah, test case template gets created by QA lead or even QA manager, whatever is the case, and I'm creating the one that I feel like more relevant. And then we talk about this is okay, so steps to reproduce basically. And then we can say after that expected results. And we probably need to add test data. Actual results. And it's always not going to be in Excel, right? So in a company, they have other tools, but they follow the similar template, right? So I'm just doing it in Excel for learning purposes. But how many people here that did learn Jira before? Have you guys did Jira before or not yet? Jira is like another tool that we'll teach you guys.
Not yet.
No? Okay, so we're gonna probably cover the Jira is a one single day class, so you can't really not do the homework because this is just a one class. It's just a tool that is created for human being. Anybody can use it, right? Anybody that have that kind of like touch the application can actually use. So the first thing first, how does a test case is different from a test scenario, right? So a test scenario is basically in a high level. high level means it's like just a surface level information, just touching base and saying, okay, I'm about to do this. That's it. And my expectation is this. It doesn't have the details for you to go out there and execute, right? So we're going to take one of the scenario, for example, this, right? The first scenario. So where is the URL, right? So if you just give this to someone and say, okay, here and test it, this scenario, they immediately cannot if they don't have knowledge of the application, right? So they're going to say, where is the URL? Where are we testing? What are we testing? Then it says, oh, when you entered all required information, but then what are the required information? I don't know what required information is. Then they're saying, okay, then they should be able to move to the next step. What happens? Like, what did I do before to go into the next step, right? So these smaller information is missing into the scenario. So what you do normally is that you take each test scenario and you make them into test case, right? So each test scenario will be turning into test case, but you still have to write test scenario. So description, the first step, user visits dealer. You guys still remember the test scenario, right? Based off of that, we're writing, right? Dealer site, and now we have to provide the URL, right? The URL goes into the test data, okay? Because that's where I'm going to probably wrap this for a second. Cancel for now. Let's see. And format cell. And then alignment wrap. Click OK. Okay. So this is your test data, right? User visits the sites. They know this is the site they have to visit. Steps basically go to Chrome. So now you're specifying where you're going. And then number 2 is open link from test data section, right? So that's your step for the first step. Expected result, what are you trying to see? I should be able to land on the auto dealer insurance code first step page. Okay, so that's my expectation, correct? Guys, make sure you ask questions if you have any. Okay. So now I should be able to see this actual result. Can I write it right now? Why or why not? If you think pass or fail. Can I write the actual result, guys? Come on.
No,
Why or why not? Why not?
Guys, that's the first.
I need to test it.
Exactly. We haven't executed yet. So let's go back in here. Okay, so we talked about the test scenario. We know how to write them now. Think about point A, point B, Manhattan and Jackson Heights, right? Okay, so we can come up with those test scenarios. Then right now we're writing the test cases, manual test cases. We haven't gone to the test script yet, okay? We haven't. So we just finishing up the test cases. After that, manual test case can be executed. If it's automation, then we don't even write test case. We directly write the test script. So now this manual test case, when the time comes, we'll execute it. But if we didn't execute, we cannot write the actual result. Actual result comes after we physically see. So if we do manual testing, we cannot just say, okay, I assume it'll work, so I'm going to go ahead and write this. No, there is no assumptions. We're going to go in here. We're going to follow everything that it says on these steps. And we're going to say, okay, it worked or it didn't work, whatever is the case. So we'll leave those 4 empty. For the next step is step number 2, user enters all required information. That's what was said. So step 1, basically enter name. I think first name, last name, phone number, zip code. I believe these are the only ones, right? Okay, let me just wrap this again. Okay, zip code and all of these are required field. We refer agent is now required, so I'm not even going to mention that. Email address is required, so I have to mention that also. And email address. Okay, so these are required information that I just entered. Then what happens? Expected result. System should take all these info without any error, right? So no error should display because you entered all the right information. That's the first expectation. Wrap. Okay. Then here you have to put the first name, last name. So test data is where you say, okay, first name is John, last name is Doe. You don't even have to specify what they are. They're in the same order. Phone number is 646-888-9999. And then email is johndoe@testmail.com, for example. And then we got the zip code is probably 1111, right? 5-digit, and is good to go. So this is your test data that you entered. So this is exact test data. Tell me why you couldn't enter this random data without even following this. Tell me why we have to enter this information instead of using our own. It doesn't really matter, right? But we can enter anything, right? But I'm saying, tell me why it's important for us to use the data that is given by these test cases at the time of execution. Who can give me a guess? Good guess.
Convenience.
Maybe, but there is a better meaning, better reason. Convenience, of course, right? Convenience is the reason why we are creating the test case. So that way we don't have to go back and read the scenario and kind of try to make sense, because this will just tell you exactly what to guide in, like you're guiding yourself. So the other reason is, which is very important, is that the consistency matters. So chances of you executing this test case every 2 weeks, once in 2 weeks, right? So you're going and you're following this every 2 weeks. And then one day you enter John Doe and you realize D is no longer capital. Once you enter, it automatically turns it into lowercase. And this could be a first sign of bug, because consistency, right? If you enter other names, you wouldn't remember the order, you wouldn't remember the uppercase, lowercase, or anything like that, right? So at least the test data needs to be consistent, so that way, when the time comes, when there is a bug in the application, you can easily recognize without having to say, okay, maybe I'm using a different name today and this is happening, or maybe I'm using a different email and this is happening, right? So we don't want that maybe. In this case, we want to know exactly what you're using. Top of that, if you find a bug, all you have to do, copy these and then send it and basically create a bug by saying this is what it failed and these are the information that I have entered and interacted with the application. So it gets really, really easy after you create your test case. All right, so that's the second step. Let's see, third step, probably just the verification. Third step is basically you want to make sure that you are able to okay, so click on the button, right? What is the button? Continue to second step button. Okay. Button. And then what are the steps? You just basically click, right? Just click button and that's it. And then expected result user should land on the second step page. Done. There is no data here, right? There is no data because it's just clicking on a button. So this completes the first test case, guys. So now my question to you guys is that did it help a little bit to visualize what you usually, what you might do at work when you create this?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Now think about this way, right? This is your test case, and then you can continue to write another test case in the bottom and things like that. Now, let's say a release is about to happen. Like today I had a release And we did like 2 days of testing prior to that, meaning yesterday testing started. And now somebody gave you 1,000 test case for the whole team, and you guys divided like 200 test cases per person. And somebody gave you these 200 of that. Is it going to be easier for you to execute?
No.
200 test cases just like this, right? It's not going to be easier for you to just say, okay, actual result, and continue, move on. Versus you get test case something like this. So am I going to, what am I doing? I'm trying to open up the text. Okay, somebody's giving you 200 of this, 200 of this versus this. Now tell me if it's going to be easier. They can give you, let's say, this one and then this one, right? So now they give you this one, not this one. Is it going to be easier than working with this 200? Or this is similar test case 200?
I think the test cases.
Yeah, because again, part of the reason why we create the test case, think about the reasoning, right?
Yes.
When we create the test case, we go through a lot, right? We study the requirement, we then make sure we do some sort of planning. After that, we write test scenarios. We come up with all possible combinations that we can. Once that is done, we take each scenario, we create the test cases. So we already followed a lot of stuff, right? We don't want to go back to requirement. We don't want to go back to planning. We don't want to go back to scenario. So now the test case is like the last items, the final product for us. So now this test case is written is because maybe near future you'll have to execute. You'll have to run those test to make sure if it works or not. So it's easier, it's better for you to document it properly. So that way you can continue to execute them every 2 weeks without having to have any sort of doubts, right? Compared to the other test case, let's say somebody writes it like this. This is again test scenario compared to like, let's say your company says we don't have to write no test case. We have scenarios. The problem here is that you cannot just expect anybody from the street to come in and start executing. You cannot expect somebody new join your team to start executing. And you cannot expect consistent result because somebody can follow whatever they want to follow. The required field means something. They can follow whatever they see at the time of the application. Here, we're being explicit and we're saying we want these specific fields. We want to enter this specific data. So definition of test case is that it's a detailed document that provides step-by-step process on how to do your testing, okay? And this is the reason why we write it is because this test case has enough priority to be able to execute again and again and again. Repeated tests, meaning we're gonna test this again and again to make sure that our existing feature or functionality is not broken, right? And that's one of the reasons, that's I guess most reasons why we create test cases. Now, what if we have test cases that we never have to go back to it again? We just tested once. Do we have to write these test cases? No, we don't, right? So that's why, you know, engineers and QA analysts and QA professionals, they're not dumb to say, okay, we're going to go and write all these details and we're going to do this extra work for no reason, right? It may sound like in the beginning, it may look like in the beginning, like, okay, these guys are going and just doing all this. They can just simply go to the application and test it and it's done. But we need to make sure that we document it because after all, this is engineering. This is not somebody just coming in and doing whatever they feel like, and then they can come back and tell their manager, hey, testing is done, everything works. And if somebody does it, and I can guarantee this because it happened or it's happening right now in some companies where the company or the manager trusts that person enough to say, okay, just do whatever, just test it and let me know if things works. He doesn't even have test case or whatever is the situation, comes back and he almost never finds any bug is because he doesn't have a baseline, right? You have to have some sort of measurement. You can't just say, okay, let me just go and check. So you'll be blinded if you just want to test the application without any sort of documents. And that's why test case is so important. So one of the things that you want to take away from here is that what are the important items in a test case? So who wants to answer that? what does a test case contains and why they're important, or at least talk about the importance items within a test case. They say important objects or elements. Usually the question is, what are the important elements in a test case? Who wants to answer this?
I think description.
Okay, what else?
Test,
Sorry, say it again.
test data.
Test data, okay. Without test data, what are you gonna do, right? What else? So they're saying, remember that the key question is, what are the important items within the application? I haven't even mentioned other, I only put the important items that bare minimum on a test case. Now, test case can have like environment, test can have versions, so many things. Environment means like, is it staging environment or QA environment? Maybe like the browser.
The test ID.
Browser could be like Chrome or not, where are we testing and things like that. So a lot more, information will be there, but in a test case, the important elements are steps, description, step to reproduce, expected result, actual result, test data, pass or fail, right? How do you know if it passed? So pass or fail, depending on your step. So let's say actual result worked as expected, for example, right?
Would the browser be also in the category of like browser that's like the setup?
Yeah, but then that will be also included in the in your test case. If somebody's like, I mean, some of the companies, there are a handful of companies still using Excel. If they do use it, then they will do it like this, right? They will put browser, because what if you have other test case and they want to do more than one browser? So what if it says browser Firefox also? Firefox. So if it mentioned both, that means you got to do the same thing on both environment at this point. That means these test case you have to execute 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, if you have this situation. So think about it, right? What if the data changes? So they can just basically simply play around with the data. Like they can just put like additional data in here and say, okay, try all possible combination at this point. So a test case can be really, really large if somebody writes end to end from the beginning to end, it will pretty much be a very big test case. But this is how a actual test case looks like, whether you use a tool or whether you use a Excel sheet, whatever is the case. I think there are internal tools out there. There are tools that can be used. For example, I'll probably bring you up something. Qtest is one tool that we'll probably go over, and I'll show you how it looks like. And instead of an Excel sheet, they basically allow you to add it right there. You click on it, it opens up, and it looks a little bit better than this, but it is kind of like this, right? Similar template looking. It's no matter what test case management tool you use, you can actually relate to it, because these are the important information. They will always have this information, right? And since you're a tester, at this point, no matter what test case management tool they talk about, if they say that, have you used ALM, have you used Qtest, have you used Zypher, all of these tools have one thing in common, is that they manage test cases. So that means in Excel, how you created the test case, but it's probably going to be harder for you to locate your test case, right? But on those tools, it's easier to locate, because they are like you can group them, you can put it in a folder and things like that. In this case, if you wrote maybe 1,000 test case, you have to go to your computer, you have to do the search and all this. It just becomes really, really hard for you to find the right test case that you need. And also it doesn't leave the history, meaning the pass fail, who executed them and when. All of those information goes missing. They don't really, unless you really record it within your Excel, is going to be, those information never going to be recorded, right? So now this application, they will not only record all those data, but also will tell you pass, fail, and then they will also give you a metrics who executed your coworker. So let's say I assign 50 test cases to you, and then I assign 50 test cases to other people. It'll give me progress. As a QA manager, I can see how many test cases you executed per day. And that's why I'm saying, as a manual tester, you have a lot more work because they can actually see what you did. As an automation, they cannot see it because the complexity is something that they cannot measure, unfortunately. So we get a lot of flexibility there. So imagine like your pie chart, somehow this is your portion of the pie chart and everybody else did their work. And your manager is going to say, well, okay, what's going on? Do you need help? Or, you know, how come you only executed 10 test cases and everybody else executed 50 test cases for the day and things like that? So it's going to be easy to measure how much work you're doing per day, right? So because of that reason, almost, I would say 80 to 90% of the companies out there use some sort of management tool, and you shouldn't be afraid of those tools because it's going to be similar. It's just a test case management tool. It basically have these, but in a better version. It's just like this, but it's a better version and better to manage those test cases. Just keep that in mind. Okay, with that said, we passed on to, we did the test case, we did the test scenario. Now it's time to write some test script, and then we will execute both manual test case and automation. So you know what, let me execute the manual test case first, and then we'll be executing the script. So when I say execution, if they say, okay, what do you like? Let's say this test case was assigned to me and they said, go ahead and execute. I'm going to open up, right? And I'm going to have double screen. The company can always request for 2 screen. So I'm going to keep this on 1 screen, and I'm going to keep the application on the other screen. So let's say this is the application and I put it into another screen. So the first thing is it says, okay, user visits dealer site. I'm going to read it. I understood. And this is the link. I'm going to click on it and it opens up. Perfect. Okay. Then 1 step later, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, what happened? I'm going to say page opened and working as expected, right? And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Then I'm going to say pass or fail. So if this didn't meet my expectation, somehow I found something sketchy, doesn't look good, whatever is the case, I can pass or fail. So in this case, pass, right? And some companies, they will require screenshots, so we'll probably screenshot and put it in here. You can also write comments that I didn't test QA because QA is down, or whatever is the case. So 1 step is done. The second step, it says enter all this information. So now I'll go back to my application. I will then start to copy this test data. I'm going to copy the whole thing so I can enter it over there. So I'm going to basically say John. So basically John, and then I'm just going to follow what I have. And then same thing, right? Email address, and then we have 111, and we had 646. We had like the exact, it has to be exact number in order for you to follow the test case. So 1 is done. It didn't say referring agents. I'm going to say no agent. I'm going to click on continue. And now I'm on the next page. Nothing was, you know, here that I can see as a bug. So that meets my criteria. I also work as expected, pass. Okay, the last one was the same thing. We went to the second page, work as expected, and pass. This test case successfully executed manually. Okay, and I did that manually myself. It's done and it's tested. Okay, we don't go and basically not visit the website and just go ahead and manually pass. That will probably get you fired, because the test cases that you will not test, those are the one who's going to have problems somehow. Like it's always like that. You tested 190 test cases, and that 2 test cases you forgot will have issues. So, and then you have to tell them like, why didn't you test it? Okay, so that is manual testing. Any question? Anybody have any question at all about manual testing? Everybody's crystal clear on how to execute a test case and write a test case. Can you even write test case like this? Who here still think cannot? Everybody here is right now. If I ask you guys, you can write me a test case.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So just making sure that before we even dive into automation, we got this squared away. I know some of you guys haven't got enough time to maybe like grasp everything, but this is going to be the time for us to like revisit some things. Okay, so now the next thing is writing automation. So you already know the test case. We're going into this and we're making sure that we enter this exact information, and then at the end we want to expect to see that it is happening correctly, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open up my existing project. I don't know where I left it, maybe in the documents. Okay, maybe I didn't save it. Okay, auto tests is this one. Okay, good. So this was my one other test case, and I'm gonna go ahead and click on this, and I'm gonna add a new test case. I gotta put a name. The new test case name will be, let's say, verify auto dealer first step page. All right, so click on add. And in this case, as you can see, insurance demo is right there. So I'm gonna, as soon as I click on record, so let me just go ahead and do that. Start recording, it will open up this website because it's the parent, right? So I have to find this auto dealer somewhere. And it's right here, code and then auto dealer. I click on that and I will now enter, right? This is the steps. We already thought out about the test case, right? We already know about the test case, so there shouldn't be any doubt there. And okay, so I have to fix this step. Okay, John Doe at testmail.com 646-555-8888 1234, and then we click on continue. Oh, sorry, I got it. 1, 2, didn't I put 5? Okay, it's 4. Okay. Click on continue, and then we want to validate this message. If this message shows up, I guess this message shows up, then we can say that we are done, like we tested properly. So I'm going to say assert, I'm going to say text, and we have asserted. Okay, now I can go back to my Selenium and I can just go ahead and stop recording. In this case, I made numbers of mistakes that I'm going to remove. So first of all, we don't need the window size. We can keep it as the way it is. So I'm going to delete that. We go into auto dealer. We clicked on this link, right? But then this link only happen when, because this step is going to fail, guys, right? This link only will happen after you hover, right? I think we hover it. Yeah. So we have to hover here. So I'm going to have to rewrite my test. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the test cases. So there is a little bit of complexity when it comes about recording, right? So I'm going to go ahead and delete this whole thing. And let's do it properly this time. Okay. So this is all about learning process. So verify auto dealer first step page, add, click on record, it will open. Okay, the first thing first in this page, once it open, I'm going to make sure that I see this message so I can kind of verify that I'm on the right page. Okay, assert, and I will go ahead and do the text. Once that is done, I want to hover over this guy. Okay, so I'm going to right click, I'm going to say mouse over. Okay, so do a mouse over. Once the mouse over is done, I want to then click on this. Okay, click. Once the click is done, I want to say this information, John Doe, plus Gmail, whatever it is the case, 646-123-8888 12345. No agent. Continue. It brings us to this page. We validate this message. If it's there, then we will say our test passed. Okay, that's it. It passed, and then done. Okay, so these, now I just want to go back and to make sure that everything else, I'm going to remove this sizing thing. Okay, and after that, I'm going to go ahead and run this real quick to make sure the test is running fine. It checked. Okay, I'm gonna have to run it again because it's probably going to fail. Okay, so okay, notice what happened, right? The test is gonna pass, of course, right? But it wouldn't pass if I didn't like put my mouse right there. So for some reason, request ID, code request, hover effect didn't work. So we have to go back and check that, right? We have to make sure that it is working properly. Let me go to my SC. Where is it? There we go. So click. So we click on this. We don't need this click, right? We just verified this, which is fine. Then mouse over is cs.edge dropdown toggle. But dropdown toggle means really like edge.dropdown. Let's see if it works properly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to test it in live to make sure that it is working as it should, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do inspect, and I'm going to basically plug it in here to see if it works perfectly. And why is it not working? So command find this, right? You see, notice like that specific, this edge toggle is not found. Okay. So maybe we can say, I want to hover over this guy. If I want to say this guy, then this guy has, this is a link and this has a code, text. It's called code request. Okay. So why not just go ahead and hover over this one, right? We can also make sure like this is inside of UL 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 is after the UL. Okay, so I can also like create my locator by myself. So I can say navigation was the parent. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Okay, and after the navigation, what happens, right? So there is 2. Okay, so I have to say divs. The one that we're interested in is div right there. Okay, so that's I have to put div. So if that is the case, then I can say after the div there is a UL. So I can say UL. Okay. Once there is a UL 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 li, right? So I can say this, and I can say li, and now there is 7 li's. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 is the one we want. And don't worry if you don't get this. Okay, we're gonna learn this at some point. And number 4. Okay, so now we get the right one. Inside of li, we have a link, which is a. Okay, notice it's 1 of 1, and if I do this, it highlights this area. Okay, so this one actually going to work if I go and plug that in there. So this was kind of like not working. So actually this one would also work. So we went through all this extra work, but it also have the right ones, right? So if I actually clicked on this one, this would probably work better. Okay, but I will probably plug in my one. Okay, for the first one, and then see what happens, right, with mine. And then if it works, then it works. Otherwise, okay, notice it works perfectly, right? And done. Our test case is good to go. I didn't have to do anything myself. Okay, so it worked. So now if I go back to the same step, and I can actually switch between other locators, and it should work too, because those other ones are also better. But this is a custom one. I'm going to teach you guys how to create your own instead of the browser creating for you and Selenium creating for you. It's going to be easier if you can create it yourself, because there will be some times where it needs customization. Okay, so any question? We just wrote a test case. Any question, guys? This makes a little bit of sense than last time, or this doesn't make sense? But what if I didn't have to? Because I know I didn't teach you guys this, right? Just yet, how to create this by yourself. So what you do is click on it. If this step didn't work, then the next thing you do, you just go ahead and find the next best thing. So in this case, this is the next best thing. And this is something that I didn't create, it came with it, all right? So if I run it, and it will still work, okay? So it's still working fine. See? And we're good to go.
Yes, it's more clear now.
Okay. So now we just finished test script, right? We just wrote our test script. The next thing is execution. We already did the manual execution is there. There is no question on that, right? So now automation, now that you have test cases, like let's say you have 100 test cases here. You have 2 buttons, right? If you click on this one, it will run everything. Okay, it will run one by one, all of it. So literally you just click on it and you just wait. You go for a coffee, you come back, your test case is done. And then you go and tell your manager everything passed, you're good to go. If your manager wants any sort of report, you take this, you basically copy the log. This log will contain everything. The log will say when was it executed, it will say how long it took and everything, all right? And then you send it over. Okay, here is a report, everything is good, right? And that's the difference between manual automation. Manual is you yourself. Every time they say go and test it, you have to come in here and do it yourself. Automation, if they say test it, you just go and come in here and click on it. Okay, that's like one way for you to go and say, okay, look, it's doing all of these and it's done. Which one do you guys like now better, manual or automation?
Automation.
Automation.
Automation has more work. You have to sit down, you have to kind of write your script just like this, right? You have to think about it. You have to make sure that you're not making mistakes, you know? But does it have a payoff, right? You have to think about if you do this, does it have a payoff? You can say, yes, of course. What if you have to execute like 4 times a month? Then it does have the payoff. It takes maybe 5, 10, 20 seconds, actually 22 seconds for you to finish testing compared to you opening it, you then entering it. And then maybe that day you feel lucky and you said, you know what, I think everything is going to work fine. And you give your thumbs up and say, okay, everything worked as expected, but that's the day it didn't work as expected. Okay, so that's where the human error comes in. Regardless whose fault it is, the casualty is being done at the company, and they call this human errors, right? These are human errors regardless of whose fault it is. It could be your fault, or it could be unknowingly, it could be you did the right thing but then you forgot to do something, whatever is the case, right? These are human errors, and automation removes that, right? Okay, so now can I expect you guys to finish those 5 test cases by Sunday? If you get stuck, YouTube has like maybe hundreds of video about this. And it's a shorter version than mine. Mine like is more like explaining everything. But on YouTube, you will find videos that is really, really short and kind of gets directly to the point, what you need to know. And then what you do is that at some point, if you become a QA engineer and you don't feel confident about writing code, you can just say, okay, you know what, I will now, let's see, executing, move it to test space. Okay. Then you can say, oh, you know what, I want to export this. You can say Java and JUnit, export it. And now you basically have code locally available that you can copy and paste it, and actually it's going to do the same thing, right? And it'll work. It's basically writing the code for you. You see this code now. I can actually run this if I want to. I can actually run it here and it'll open and do the same thing. And notice what it does, right? Selenium, find this, find that. So we're going to learn all of that. We're going to actually learn how to create this ourselves from scratch instead of recording. The idea is that recording is going to go away from your life after some time. When you join a company, you will probably not record and just write it yourself because it's more time saving. But recording does take a little bit of time for you to do all of that yourself and then do it. But then nobody's going to say, why are you recording this? You're supposed to like write it yourself. Nobody's going to say that. Anything will help, right? Anything for you to do your job, it will be welcomed and you can do it. That's not a problem. Okay, so it's already 10:11, guys. I don't know if this was productive today, but let's, the next classes, like I said, you guys are not a huge group. This is 6 people. It'll be relatively easy for us to help you get a job. End of the day, everybody here for a job, right? And we recognize that, we know that this is the reason why everybody's here, but you'll have to actually do something. We'll have to actually focus a little bit, so that way we can help you for that kind of goal, right? Even if
Can
you
you write
join a
down the
company,
homework assignment in the group chat?
yeah, if you do a video and you send me on the group chat, then I
No,
will
I'm
not
saying,
ask you to
can
do.
you, I'm saying
Mhm.
like in the group chat, like write down the requirements for the homework
Well,
for a reminder.
I want you to write 5 test cases, right? And I'll give you a reminder. That's not a problem. I'm saying like you'll have to write your own test case, right?
Yeah.
So the website is there. I would say just use this website because it's easier to deal with. If you try to automate Facebook, you're gonna have a nightmare because they basically try people not to go and automate it, because you can actually create a robot to every day go and do things, and Facebook prevents those. So there is a reason why automation, when it comes about Facebook and those like even Twitter and things like that, it's going to be harder to automate because of these the bots they create. I mean, you already heard about Twitter bot and things like that. So those can be used, like you can actually generate a unique message every day and post it in your status. Like if Facebook allows it, the automation, you can actually create a thoughtful, unique messages. You go out there, Google, find something unique, and every day you can have unique status, something nice, pleasant, whatever, and you can automate that, and it'll do it for you, right? But do you need the UI for that purpose? You don't need the UI. When people create the bot, you don't need to see what's happening, right? They just say, okay, if it happens, it happens. It's like something like this. I can create a bot that will be like pretty much, I can drive it right from here. I can write some code and then execute it from here, and it will go and do whatever I want, right? And that's how it works, right? But like I said, you will have to create your test cases. You can choose between different line of business here. You got the personal, you got a business, you got the code request application. There is every possible domain that is going to be on your resume. It's here, right? So it's easier for you to get familiar with how they are and what you're testing. And then when it comes about actually going and doing it, you will probably have similar experience, because this is very similar to an actual agent center that Nationwide Insurance I used to work for. But like I said, you guys, 5 test cases, if not 5 test cases, if you can write 2, 3 at least, acceptable as long as you do it correctly. But like I said, my expectation is 5. If you can do 2 or 3, I will say, okay, fine. But it's just like excellent, good, and then you have just okay, right? Okay, excellent, good, the different kind of like 5 that you'll probably get. But again, I want to move forward to the next class, which is going to be, you're going to be installing this IDE, and then you're going to be writing code fresh. You're going to be creating new projects. So once you create the project, you have to then actually configure the whole thing. So we're going to show you how to create from scratch. So if your manager comes and says, okay, create me this, you're going to be able to create it. You're going to be more technical. So this should be more exciting for you. You will, like I said, once a automation person joins a company, you'll see all the manual testers like, oh, you do automation. Wow. Okay. Because they don't really, either they don't want to do automation, they're scared, or they haven't learned, and they never had the opportunity, because all their life they are working on the manual side in that company, and they're pretty important, and they don't have to worry about job security because they're important. So now once you know automation, you'll see how much they're looking into, like, oh wow, okay, maybe I'll learn a little bit from you. And they will probably offer you all the help to get you up to speed so you can write automation. But test automation gives you a little bit more respect because you're more technical. You will have as much as knowledge as a developer because he writes code and you write code also. That's after some time, you will get the same exact mentality. How the developer thinks, you'll probably think the same way, but it will take time. It'll take 3, 4, 5 years before you get there. But in the beginning, you'll basically face a lot of issues. Those issues are going to teach you something. So whenever you face issues, you should be happy and try to fix that. Try to find a solution. YouTube it, wherever you go, research it, do whatever you need to do in order to fix that issue. With that said, guys, I will see you guys on Sunday with the expectation that you guys will finish this. And then Sunday, hopefully we just do our first test case, or at least we create a framework from scratch with Java and Selenium and IntelliJ, right? So 3 things we're going to be using to create something from scratch. You'll see from your own computer things that are happening automatically as you're writing commands. And we can only do that once you guys get through this and have a better understanding how automation works. All right, I will see you guys on Sunday.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you.